Okay, we finally made it, people. We finally made it to the worst 10 films, for me, of 2000. And boy, these are some stinkers. All 10 of these films are below 1-star rating for me. Number 10 is Skulls. For me, this is something that could have been interesting and did have some premise to it. The whole middle section of the movie is probably the most interesting part in the entire film, which is really strange because it's supposed to progress higher and get more interesting as a movie goes on, but the middle it like peaks in the middle. That's all the best it'll ever be. And first act of it, awfully boring, didn't care that much for the characters at all, and then once Paul Walker comes in, it starts getting a little more interesting. Once this crime happens, it picks up to a good thriller pace, all until the point where it gets to the final climax of the film and it just sort of peters out. Plus, one of the last lines in the film is one of the most comically just delivered lines in a movie I have seen, and it's done by Paul Walker, and I can't even remember the exact quote. They're in a duel, and he's going to kill the main character, but the main character is like, I'm not even going to do this. He throws down the gun. He's got to shoot him, but he's conflicted, and he's like, and the father's telling him to shoot him, I think. It's hard to remember exactly the exact details. I just remember laughing so hard when Paul Walker is like talking to his father, and it's something along the lines of this. I can't be completely certain. Maybe Skull fans will know the exact quote, but it's sort of like this. Daddy, no! The face isn't that bad, but it's something along those lines, and I couldn't stop laughing. Number 9 is a film that many people consider one of the worst films of all time. It is Battlefield Earth. Yes, so much of this movie is awful. The directing, the camera angles even, the acting, the characters, the story, the plot. Everything in this film doesn't make sense at all. It's so horribly bad that it's hilarious, and you question, how can this movie have been made? There wasn't someone that looked at the script. There wasn't some actor that talked to the director. There wasn't someone on set that questioned, is this really how the movie should be? Should we really be going this direction? It's stupid to think that, but that's the reason why it still is never going to get a 0-star for me, because there is some enjoyment. There's something that's so bad that it's hilarious. My number 8 is another Disney film that's a sequel to a classic that went straight to DVD, and it's very, very similar to Lady and the Tramp 2, but worse. Little Mermaid 2, Return to the Sea. Ariel's daughter is a human who wants to be a mermaid. Gee, haven't we heard that one before? Something similar where the kid to the parents in the original film want to be something that they're not right now, that the parents strive to be. Disney, were you running out of ideas on 2000? Yeah, Little Mermaid 2, while it is similar and you think you can enjoy it because it's just a reversal, the problem is the characters aren't as interesting as Little Mermaid. They even fail at the music. The music, I don't remember a single chorus of any of the music in it, and I have just watched it like a couple months ago. I don't remember a damn thing. And even the villain fails. It's just really bad. My number 7 is the directorial debut of a certain director that is only known by 3 single letters. MCG. Now, you might remember him as the director that's made such classics as This Means War, 3 Days to Kill, and of course the ultra blockbuster big horror movie extravaganza from last year, Ouija. Of course I am being sarcastic. Now really, the only movie that I've ever liked that he's directed is Terminator Salvation, which is my third favorite Terminator out of the 5 Terminator films. So what movie did he direct in the year 2000? Some people might not remember it, but he directed Charlie's Angels. Now honestly, there is some things I like about the movie. That's why it's number 7 rather than number 1 on the worst movies of the year 2000. There's plenty of good actresses and actors in it, which we've got Drew Barrymore, Lucy Liu, Cameron Diaz, Bill Murray, Sam Rockwell, Tim Curry, and Crispin Glover does his thing by being the creepiest person in the movie. So there's plenty of good stars in it, and it's acted pretty well, and some of the cheesiness does have its charm. But I had forgotten a lot of Charlie's Angels until I rewatched it, and I just don't like it anymore. And it is very apparent that this movie came out after The Matrix, because all the action is trying to parody or trying to be like The Matrix, and it's really nauseating. My number 6 is an unnecessary sequel that, pretty much like Heavy Metal 2000, takes away all the things that was good about the first one and just throws it out the window. I am talking about Book of Shadows, The Blair Witch 2. The Blair Witch Project 2 is not a found footage at all. In fact, it's just normal camera angles and shot like a normal movie, but it's not that good. Now, to be honest, there is some great potential in this movie. It could have been a really nice psychological horror film where the people are slowly going insane, turning on each other, while they're trapped in this warehouse sort of thing. But one of the reasons that it all goes horribly wrong is because of apparently studio involvement and them adding footage and editing it in an awful way. And boy, let me tell you, when I watched it, I thought I was losing my mind just trying to keep up with the strange editing style of this film. Okay, apparently when the movie was made and the director started making this psychological horror film, suddenly the studio gets the footage and it doesn't seem too mainstream horror to them, so they decide to reshoot a whole entire scene, which is to try to make it more horror. And it is a scene where these people are just getting butchered in the woods and we're not sure what's exactly going on there. But instead of putting that extra scene in a certain place in the movie where it would make sense, instead they chopped it up into little pieces and sprinkled it about the entire film. There's going to be some points in the film where you're just watching a scene, everything looks like it's fine, and then suddenly a random split second of this scene is just interwoven and just placed in there, and it's like unsettling, and it's just, why? But even with the studio involvement and some of the things that ultimately are the worst part of this movie, even if you throw all that out, it's still not a flawless psychological horror film. There's still plenty of things that weren't studio involvement that were bad, and for that, even though it has potential, it's still about a half star for me. Okay, my number 5 worst film of the year 2000 is Soul Survivors. Anyway, this is a film that actually has a decent twist to it. I liked it, and it made sense, and some of the other things that didn't quite make sense at the beginning when you're first watching this movie, it makes sense when the twist happens, so I have to give it some credit to that. Plus, even though the first act has a lot of cheesy moments and a lot of bad moments, there is a charm to it, and I kind of like it in a bad, so bad that it's good sort of way. The reason why Soul Survivors is awful enough to make it a half a star movie for me is because the entire second act, the whole middle, is slow, it's boring, not scary at all, And there's just so many random things that even though there's a twist that happens that explains some of these random things, there's still plenty of other random things left hanging that make absolutely no sense and just feel like they're thrown in there try to scare you. Alright, my number 4 is a film with Liam Neeson, Sandra Bullock, and Oliver Platt in it. It's Gun-Shy. Gun-Shy is a comedy. I believe it's considered dark comedy when it doesn't really make too much of sense that it's a dark comedy. Like a lot of Oliver Platt stuff, yeah, his moments are definitely dark comedy because he's this mob boss. He just goes so ballistic and violent that he just starts like beating the hell out of people, and it's done in a comedic fashion, but it is sort of twisted and dark. But the rest of the jokes in this movie are either gay jokes or fart jokes. I am not kidding. This is a movie starring Liam Neeson, and half of the jokes practically are fart jokes because his character is constipated. And he's constipated because he's this CIA agent that goes undercover, and now he's really stressed and he's tormented by his last mission, and so now he's become constipated, and the only one that can help him get unconstipated is Sandra Bullock. And what, I'm not making this up. This is actually in the movie, okay? And so Liam Neeson still has to go undercover because he doesn't want to quit, and so he's undercover trying to infiltrate a mob boss, and Oliver Platt is one of those not hitmen, but one of the higher-ups. And yeah, this movie is Gun-Shy, and it sounds ridiculous when I just spouted off what this movie is about, but this is really what it's about, and it's really sad. Okay, I might get some flack with my number 3 pick because, in all honesty, I looked up the percentages in Rotten Tomatoes. It's got a 91, I believe, for critics and a 90 for audience. But for the life of me, I could not make it through this film. I could not watch the whole thing. And this is coming from a guy that has watched Battlefield Earth in one sitting, Dungeons and Dragons, the last movie I just spouted out, and Soul Survivors, and plenty of other movies I can get through just fine. I cannot get through this film. Number 3 is High Fidelity. Okay, normally the rule is if I do not finish a film, if I cannot sit through the whole thing, I do not count it in my worst or top films of that year because I haven't given it a chance. However, every so often there's a film that I can't finish that's just so bad that I have to mention it. And High Fidelity is one of those. I couldn't stand the character at all. John Cusack, I like the guy. He was in a really good movie just this year, Love and Mercy. He was awesome in that role. High Fidelity, I couldn't stand his character. He was too douchey. He was too whiny. He was too terrible of a person. And when you can't get invested in the main character, then what's the point of the movie? Okay, my number 2 is a film that is clearly meant to be a bad movie. It's clearly meant to be so bad that it's funny and ridiculous and you just can't take it seriously. The problem is it's a sequel to a B-movie horror film that, even though it is ridiculous, even though the plot is sometimes so bad that it's good, the original I actually genuinely liked. My second worst film of the year 2000 is the sequel to this movie that I liked. It is Jack Frost 2, Revenge of the Mutant Killer Snowman. Do I really need to go into detail about this film? I mean, the title alone should tell you how ridiculous this movie sounds. There's very little redeemable qualities to this sequel. There's some charming moments, there's some moments that are so bad that they're good. It feels like they're trying too hard to be awful. Sometimes when a movie is so bad that it's hilarious, it's because the filmmakers and the people making the film just really thought they were hitting gold. They really thought they were doing something good. And so there's sort of an innocence to it. It's really hard to make something purposely bad to be funny because it just ends up being really bad. Alright, my number one worst film of the year 2000 is a film that I watched as a kid. My sister watched this a lot too. It is a kid's film. If you look at it in that way, then it could be an acceptable film. And I stand by that because I still feel this film is a half-star worthy. But my number one is The Little Vampire. It is a kid's movie. It is whimsical, and there are some moments where it does get a little creepy and a little dark to the point where it doesn't feel like a children's movie at all. Because the vampires in this movie are classical vampires, and they still drink blood and do all these other crazy things. Plus, our hero is a scaredy cat that learns to be brave, so there is a good general message in the film. I think the problem is, even though there is some dark moments, even though it might be a little too scary for some children unless they think vampires are frickin' awesome, overall, the film feels way too kiddie for me to like anymore. Dialogue is downright awful. All of the acting in this film is either way too over the top or just plain awful from pretty much everyone in this film. The plot is ridiculous. There's frickin' horribly CGI vampire cows that poop on the windshield, and oh god. Yeah, I'm just not gonna say too much about this film. Like I said, it is my worst of 2000, but that's only because rewatching it now, I can't imagine why I used to like this film, and it's a little too kiddie. But for a kids movie, it is decent. It's okay. It's just one of those kinds of kids movies that you're just not gonna like as adults unless you grew up watching it and you have a big nostalgia factor towards the film. Other than that, there's really nothing you will like about this film. Okay, so out of the 109 movies I've seen from the year 2000, I've told you my top 50 and my worst 20. So now I'm gonna have to get started on watching the movies from 2001 because that will be the next list eventually. I've already made it through 28 of those films from the year 2001, and I've got plenty to go. If you've liked my countdowns, please check my reviews for the year 2015 because I've got about 85. And as always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.